Committee to order. First, Pledge of Allegiance.
To the flag of the to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, liberty, justice for all.
Okay, moving on to public comment. We do have Aaron Crawford is on WebEx or on the line. Aaron?
Yes. Thank you, Chair Seifelt and supervisors. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay, fantastic. My comment today is just regarding the library materials complaint process. I'm just anxious to hear that presentation. And I just thank you for putting this on the agenda today because many of us, like myself, are very concerned to know of the complaint process. And I also want to bring to your attention the great concerns of many other parents and many other homeschooling families like myself. It's been our impression that the Marathon County Library has greatly gone downhill in the content that they're providing and exposing our children to. And I can tell you as a fellow home educator in many circles of influence that the narrative out there is to keep a close eye on your children and keep them guarded when you come into the public library. Many of us really used to enjoy letting our children roam the aisles and feel that they could adequately choose books that were safe and appropriate for their ages. However, with the agendas being pushed and the overt sexualization that is happening to our children, the narrative is now very much to err on the side of caution and to shield your children from the obvious sexual agendas. June is Pride Month, and the displays set out right in the teen section are complete with all the books and posters to charge up our children's sexual grooming. This is just so terribly unfortunate, and it's really too bad that this has happened because as homeschoolers, we rely on that library 100% to provide for our families good content and material. And I just always find it so interesting how we have all of these checks and balances in place with child protection services, to the Right Start program, to our court systems to ensure the safety of our children is our utmost responsibility. And yet here in our Marathon County Library is just horrible graphic content in these books, from just outright plain porn to written pornography and describing very lewd sexual acts among juveniles. Obviously, distribution of pornography to minors is illegal, yet this is in the juvenile section of our public library. So I'm making this public comment today to express our deepest concerns as home educators and parents and to plead with the supervisors to do something about this and stop the sexual abuse of our children. The county allocated over $3.5 million for our public library last year. And as a taxpayer, I just cannot reconcile this with what's sitting, but with what content is sitting out there waiting to get into innocent hands. And we can do much better than this. And I would just encourage this committee and the rest of the Marathon County Board of Supervisors to find a solution to this problem so we can do a much better job of filtering the content that is making its way into our children's hands. Thank you very much. That's all I have to say.
Thank you, Aaron. Moving on to number 4, approve the minutes of the July 22 Extension Education Economics Development Committee meeting. Do we have a motion? Motion by Supervisor Rosenberg, second by Supervisor Unger. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed?
Aye.
Motion carried. Number 5, policy issues, discussion, and potential committee determination. 5A, continue discussion of recommendations to the Executive Committee for updates to the strategic objective and expected outcome found in the 2019-2022 strategic plan. 5A1, new strategies to be added to the existing objective plan. Supervisor Vice Chair McEwen.
That's totally fine. The supervisor was great. Thank you, Mr. Chair. The last time we met, and I have been meeting with the other standing committees, and what I hope we can accomplish is to have each of the standing committees review the objectives that they are the lead committee for. And Triple ED actually has the most. They have 4 objectives out of the 12 that they're designated as the lead committee. I don't know if, is Becky online? Okay. I did meet with her.
Yes, I am.
Thank you, Becky. I'm going to kind of tee it off for you, but like I'll just follow up on what I've been doing with the other committees. But what I wanted each committee to do is to look at, for instance, 8.7, which you are the lead committee with infrastructure. Now, Mr. Chair, if it's okay with you, infrastructure finished this today and approved the drafts. And I don't know if you have those up there yet. If just for an example to go through what infrastructure did, and like I said, we could go through 8.7 very quickly, and of course, if you have different changes than we do, that's great. They don't have to be identical to infrastructure. We were looking at it from our end, but we did change a few things on the 8.7. And I can't read that up there, but I do have notes. Okay, yeah, I'm going to turn it, Becky. I'm going to turn it over to Administrator Leonard, and he can go over what we did with each one of the strategies, the objective, and the one outcome measure that's in 8.7.
Thank you, Vice Chair McEwen. So I'll just go through, and this is actually from the packet from infrastructure this morning, which is up on your screen right now. But I want to highlight a couple of changes that were made. So this is objective 8.7. Again, the objective is to strive to provide affordable, reliable, high-speed internet access throughout the county. The direction from infrastructure was for strategy A, to essentially mark that as complete, but to also modify that to add a new strategy. So we termed that strategy A1. And the language on the screen was modified slightly this morning to read as follows: support the broadband task force in executing continued comprehensive approach to delivering countywide high-speed internet access with a particular focus on addressing unserved and underserved areas. So on your screen, essentially, they struck the language following the word access until the word with, and then added unserved to the reference to underserved. So again, it will read, support the broadband task force in executing a continued comprehensive approach to delivering countywide high-speed internet access with a particular focus on addressing unserved and underserved areas. With respect to strategy B, the discussion at a previous meeting, and there was no modification made to that this morning, was essentially to strike the last 2 words of the strategy, which were the words through McDevco. And again, the thought on that was to say, not that we shouldn't work with McDevco, but rather not to limit the strategy to be working with McDevco, but also seek out other opportunities. Then moving to strategy C, there was a modification made to that language this morning, and that was to strike the second word in the strategy, and that was financial. So a similar logic, rather than limit ourselves to developing financial incentives, it was now to read, develop incentives to encourage carriers/providers to commit to helping accomplish this objective in Marathon County. Again, the idea, by striking the language, you actually expand the scope. There were no other changes made to the draft recommendations in the infrastructure packet that are on the screen. However, when you look at the outcome measure section, they did change one date. and that was in the first of the two measures that they added to read by December 31st of 2022 as opposed to 2024, develop an improved data inventory relative to internet service speeds available throughout the county.
Thank you, Administrator Alden. And Supervisor Book, I know we had talked about strategy B as far as you had talked to, I believe, the director from McDevco. Is there anything you'd like to add to that? I mean, this would be something, if this is what this committee, if they want to keep that or modify it, that's fine, but this is what came out of infrastructure.
I think this is good, what is written, and I did check with Kim Weber, and she's been in, she presented at the infrastructure meeting, and I think it's been determined agreeably on every side. So with John, she spoke with John Robinson, etc. So.
Okay, thank you. I just know we had discussed that, so if that's taken care of, that's great.
Great, thank you.
So basically, 8.7, which Triple ED shares with infrastructure, if that's, I mean, this is up to this committee if you want to leave that or you want to change any of the stuff, and you'll be able to get that that draft, which we did vote on at infrastructure to bring forward to the executive committee next week. So it should be on there. But I just want to know if there's any suggestions at this point in time with 8.7 from this committee, or that's up to you. I don't know how fast you want to move forward, but can we consider you're still going to talk about 8.7, or are we good to go with it with this committee? I'm just asking.
Supervisor Rosenberg?
Oh, the only thing I was interested in is there's a lot of money being thrown in the county, in the state, in the country at all this, and we talk about high-speed internet and access. And I don't want to see a bunch of numbers and complications, but it would be interesting and informative to know where some start point, pick it, I don't care where it is, and when we're providing high speed, how many have, at what levels are these going to be at when we're done, so that we're not doing this in 3 years because our internet isn't strong enough, and who doesn't have it, the percentages. Are those figures available, or is that hard to obtain?
I think you can, I mean, in terms of what data is available, you're going to see some things from PSC. You can get some proprietary information perhaps from some of the vendors. I know when I've spoken with Charter in the past, even some of the initiatives or some of the grants target different areas that kind of lean more towards their business plan, if you will, which makes sense, versus sort of maybe a more broad look at where we'd like to see it. And so there's some good conversations to be had in terms of teasing out some of those spaces that maybe some of the programs might not get at right away. And I think through what you're talking about, you could generate a pretty decent look at some of the pockets that maybe these programs are going to help in terms of where they go, but where still are the gaps, and why are they gaps? Is it because the grant didn't allow for it, or didn't dovetail with the business plan, or those types of questions? And if there were places where there were opportunities to engage them directly, the vendors, or other kind of methods to try to fill those gaps, then I think you could look at that and get a good sense of it, based on where we are today and all the things that are happening, to your point. So I don't know that we have much beyond what data the Broadband Task Force has already kind of brought to bear, but we can certainly make the people we've engaged with already know that we'd like to see some of the things you're speaking to, because I don't think it would be part and parcel of the projects they're putting together.
If I can add one thing, I think Chris hit the nail on the head with, right now the data we have through PSC A lot of those maps we just know are not very effective in how they calculate who's served or who's underserved and who's unserved. I will say that the infrastructure committee, that maybe they didn't say, hey, where are we now in terms of data, other than working with the broadband task force. As Chris referenced, we're trying to get better data. So if you're out at the fair this week, there's a booth out there that the broadband task force is staffing with Marathon County staff, encouraging people to utilize the speed test. We have a QR code out there and ask with some flyers for people to take home and run speed tests to kind of get us that baseline information of where we have the service gaps so we can target those unserved and underserved areas. But the last thing I'll reference is to your point about setting the target, like where we want to be, so that we're not in a year where, we're not trying to get 10 megabytes down and 1 up or 25.3. The broadband task force and ultimately infrastructure did set a target for where we want to be by the end of 2023 through one of their outcome measures, and that was to ensure 85% of households have access to high-speed internet, which they defined as 50 megabits down and 10 megabits up. And the last thing I'll say, if you do want to look at the infrastructure packet this morning that's on the county board calendar, they do have a couple of maps in there that are from Bug Tussle, where they show where a lot of expansion is happening, both in terms of tower construction and fiber that's being laid, and what the kind of the timetables look like for that fiber, what's in engineering right now and what's actually being laid. So based on the action taken by the board, primarily through the PSC grant process, but also very much so through working the partnership with Bug Tussle, there is a lot of work being done in Marathon County. If you go to the recording of the infrastructure meeting this morning, Jerry Klein you'll be able to see his presentation. He talked through what that looks like. There is a lot being done in Marathon County, hopefully in pursuit of achieving that goal by the end of next year, that 85% of households have access to that higher level of service. I hope that answers your question to some extent.
It does kind of, but we're turning a fire hose of money on this, we collectively, and I just want to make sure it lands where it should. And not to pick on a company, but I had Frontier for my phone service and my internet for a long time, and it was awful. They can fix my internet in 2 weeks. I live in Weston behind the DC Everest High School. 2 weeks? You can't be without an internet for 2 weeks anymore.
Yeah, with respect to your comment on funding, that also was, Jerry Klein gave a little bit of information relative to new federal funding that is at least potentially in the works relative to broadband. And I don't know that I can come up with a better analogy than what you did, that if there's a fire hose of money being thrown at it. There are a lot of grants that have been made available at the state level. As you know, the PSC grant amount has continued to grow. The federal grants through the RDOF program, and now the new, I believe it's being called BEAD, the new BEAD grant programs. The hope being, and this is just my assessment, they want to spur broadband expansion, but all I can say is the infrastructure committee did set the target of 85%, having that 50-10 level by the end of next year.
Okay, Supervisor Baker?
I had the opportunity to watch that section of the infrastructure meeting, and I would support the changes that the infrastructure committee recommended.
Is that a form of a motion? Do we need a motion for that?
Yeah, that would be up to you, Mr. Chair. What we did at infrastructure is we went through the two that we had, 8.7 and 10.12, and then at the end we did have a motion to accept the changes to provide to the executive committee. But you can do it one at a time, or it's up to you.
I'll make a motion to support that one individually, since the infrastructure committee has done a lot of work on that already.
Okay, is there a second? Supervisor Rosenberg? All those in favor of supporting the changes from infrastructure for objective 8.7, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion
Aye.
carried. Okay, we'll keep moving on to the other three.
Okay, we'll go to 10.6, which only has two strategies and two outcome measures. And from the updates from Administrator Leonard on 10.6 on Strategy A, which is work with North Central Wisconsin Workforce Development Board to ensure a well-trained workforce. There were two action items that were taken on that according to the updates. I don't know if you had, these are the updates from Administrator Leonard that was mailed out on the 4th of July. Did everybody see those? You didn't see those?
Yep, I did, yeah.
Oh, okay, yeah, he sent an email out on the 4th of July, and I printed it out, because I can't, keep going back and forth with all of them. It's difficult, but I printed mine out. But there were two items that were taken on, or two action items that were taken on Strategy A, and that is, one is to North Central Wisconsin Regional Planning Commission regularly works with North Central Wisconsin Workforce Development Board, including recent preparations of regional recovery plan, a report on workforce talent attraction, plan to identify local goals, priorities, strategies, and recommendations. And the second, number two, is Marathon County Administration has included North Central Wisconsin Workforce Development staff on the recent strategy planning team, working to develop a plan to address the strong storage of quality and affordable child care within Marathon County. And with that, I know I had mentioned, if you look at Chapter 10, which you have 10.6, but in Chapter 10, the very first objective, ensure that every person has the opportunity to education and employment to be self-supporting, and then our 10.1A is develop policies to support affordable, high-quality child care. Just throwing that out there, if that's another strategy, and no means am I talking about Marathon County opening up a child care. That's not what the intent is. The Workforce Development Board, which I'm on that board, they have a program, a grant that they applied for and got, and they would assist Marathon County with what it is to train individuals to open their own licensed, qualified child care. And they have like a grant of $5,000. Has nothing, Marathon County doesn't have to do anything with it, but could we work with them to, people to direct them in that, direct them in that direction, but two words, but in that area. Just like I said, for examples, and I think Administrator Leonard, wasn't there something else that the information you were sent?
The only update I have is, as all of you know, it's been covered in the news quite a bit recently. Channel 7 has been doing an ongoing series of news segments on the child care dilemma, I think is the title they've given it. Marathon County was the lead applicant for a grant through the Department of Children's and Families, and we did receive that grant. We were one of the first, kind of in the first cohort of that, and we've had 2 facilitated meetings now with the people that have been hired by the Department of Children and Families to go around the state and facilitate those discussions with the grant recipients. That group is Children's First Finance. So we have representatives from various sectors, school districts, business. The Chamber of Commerce is represented, technical college, the university system, local high schools, or school districts, I should say, and I'm going to leave a whole bunch of people out because I don't have the list in front of me, but we had a very large group of entities that were represented, essentially to do strategic planning to see what could we do to address the shortage of child care within our community. And I sent some information to all of you after your last meeting just to show you the website that the Department of Children's and Families has that shows what that gap in supply is. We have certainly not completed that work, and we haven't developed what that strategic plan looks like and what the various roles that could be played. I'll just say one that the state has been looking into and had another companion grant available for was essentially to have businesses agree to pay a portion of the cost, the actual cost of childcare. The state would pay a significant portion of that cost to essentially make the childcare providers more whole in terms of their true cost of doing business. But that's where we are right now in relative to the issue of childcare. But as Vice Chair McEwen noted, that's not within your strategic plan. The reason county administration is moving in that direction is, again, based on the direction provided by was initially this committee and ultimately the full board in approving the annual administrator's work plan, but it's not within your strategic plan. It is, however, in your comprehensive plan.
Thank you. And again, that's another thing, I forgot to bring that up. There are other strategies under Chapter 10, which you have 10.6. There are other strategies. Are there any of, like I said, these may be affecting us more now than it was in 2016. Child care has always been a problem, but not to the point it is. And like I said, the Workforce Development Board, which I sit on that board, they would do all the work. It's the idea is to get people to be trained and licensed child care providers. They would be their own entrepreneurs. They would open up their own businesses. The county doesn't have to do anything as far as supporting it. But the Workforce Development Board will. They'll get them signed up for these programs. But like I said, it's in the comp plan, but it's not in the strategic plan.
Okay, thank you. Supervisor Rosenberg?
Are we engaging at all with the unions and the apprenticeship programs that are going on? I mean, or have we, I never hear about that, and
I don't believe so.
Your reference to the term "we," meaning Marathon County staff? Off the top of my head, I can't think of anything that, I mean, I certainly know that we recruit from those entities for our skilled positions within facilities and capital management. And we contract with, for our facility work, we contract a fair amount of that out through the request for proposals that we make available to local construction entities. Outside of that engagement, I'm not aware of anything other than partnering through with the Workforce Development Board. This is kind of in alignment with what I think I said at this committee last time. The Marathon County hasn't historically, we don't have staff that are economic development staff. I think Supervisor Baker brought up, maybe I'm wrong if it wasn't you, I apologize, but the discussion about what should the county's role be in economic development, there are some counties that have economic development staff. We have never directly employed those individuals. We've partnered with McDevco. We are certainly chamber members, and I sit on the chamber board, excuse me, to make sure that the county is engaged in discussions and aware of what the Chamber of Commerce is doing. But off the top of my head, I can't come up with anything else, and I'm probably missing something, but nothing's occurring to me. I don't know, Chris, if you're aware of anything.
No, there's nothing else that comes to mind right now. I mean, in my experience, a lot of the apprenticeship program engagement and development tends to happen between the business community and schools, kind of as part of things the county's involved in. And a lot of the things we do in economic development in that realm anyway are, we have convening authority. Sometimes we can allocate funding here or there, but generally speaking, a lot of that activity is things that are supported by organizations we participate in, but not something we've had a direct hand in. I know that some counties are looking at some of the workforce challenges just in general, figuring out maybe there's ways to get, like, the highway department to send a truck to the schools or colleges to get people engaged in what does it look like, how, you know, kind of like they do with law enforcement and fire, you know, that same kind of generate interest, show people what people do, that they're from here, you know, if people are interested, they see a trajectory that might align with a local training that's offered at one of the tech schools, for instance. But those things, as I understand them, are still very sort of ideas right now that people are kicking around. But so there might be opportunities for things like that down the line that are more county focused. But I think generally we're looking broadly, like most of the people that are really engaging in that more directly.
Yeah, the only other thing I would add is Chris's comments made me think of the heavy metal tour that McDevco participates in with local manufacturers to take youth that are in school, take them out to show them what the skilled trades or manufacturing careers might look like for them to kind of, you know, change their contemplation. They might have one perception of what those careers might be. The opportunity to see them in action on a day might get people interested in it. But again, our involvement is, I think Chris's word is perfect, tangential. You know, we're not directly leading that.
I'm just saying, let's not lose sight of that. If you want a plumber or an electrician or a pipe fitter or a welder or an insulator, that's where they get trained, largely.
If I could, thank you. If I could just, Supervisor Book, do you have anything to add to strategy A?
No, not at this time. I don't. I think it looks good.
Supervisor Baker?
I have a question just to help my understanding of the whole process of developing the strategic plan for both Vice Chair McEwen and Administrator Leonard. And then I have a comment after that. So do we view this plan as being a strategic plan for Marathon County government, or do we view this as being a strategic plan for Marathon County as a whole?
I would say both. And what I mean by that, Supervisor Baker, is the services or the policies that we set are there to serve the people in Marathon County. But as far as we're not setting strategic plans for Greeneck or for the paper mills or anything like that, it's more for Marathon County, that the employees, our staff, that we want them to implement these policies. Is that answer?
I think that's a really good question. And I think it's demonstrated by 10.6. You know, the strategy for us to work with North Central Wisconsin Workforce Development Board to ensure a well-trained workforce. Right now, the extent of that is Vice Chair McEwen serves on that board along with Supervisor Overbeck. Strategy B, seek out opportunities to partner with local education providers. I think I have a pretty good relationship I have historically with the UW Stevens Point Wausau campus to have conversations about, hey, are there things we could do to partner together? But if the board wants a more direct approach, you know, I would welcome that. I would welcome some clarity on what your expectation is, because I think, to your point, some of these are less than clear in terms of what does success look like and what is the expectation of county staff versus, you know, where do we want the community to go? What role is our county staff people going to perform? Because a lot of these are not us doing them directly.
Follow up? So that was kind of that aligns with what I was thinking. So I've been looking at ours, trying to prioritize which strategies, and so many of the strategies are not really things that, you know, are under our purview. So in industry and my customers, we talk a lot about alignment, and, you know, the question is, should our strategic plan be aligned with our core functions, our core responsibilities, and with our core with our budget? So like, I don't know what, on 10.6, if there's any budget items that, other than some of Vice Chair McEwen's time. In the same way with a couple of the next three. Whereas if you look at like 10.1, 10.2, and 10.8, those are $30 to $50 million of our budget and are directly under our control. So I mean, I toyed with the idea, and I'm not trying to be divisive, but I toyed with the idea of making a motion that we eliminate 10.6, 10.8, and 10.10 and add, I'm sorry, yeah, and then add, I made a mistake speaking, I'm sorry. The ones that I was talking about are the infrastructure ones, 8.1, 8.2, and 8.8, which are contribute, account for about $35 to $50 million of our budget, and they're under our direct control. I misspoke previously. I'm sorry for saying the wrong ones. As opposed to the three that we have now, we're talking about 3.7 million for the library, 85,000 for McDevco. It's not a very large part of our budget. It's not. McDevco and the library are not governance. We don't have a governance relationship. It's a non-governance. So the question to me is, do we want the strategic plan to align with our core functions and with our budget? And I don't know what the right answer for that is. I mean, they can be aspirational goals that we want the county, if they're a goal for the whole county, if they're objectives for the whole county, we can say this is what we'd like the county to do. We want to encourage it. And I don't think that's bad. But I think it's a little different than saying this is what county government is going to focus on, and this is what county government's going to be involved in. So I'm not saying I have the answer or necessarily agree one way or the other. I just kind of wanted to throw that out for discussion. Thank you.
I was just going to say, kind of along the lines of what you're speaking to there. In previous meetings on here and elsewhere, the question around like how do you prioritize something, and that might be an angle for you to pursue in terms of maybe the county within all of these things would say we want you to prioritize items that are more directly correlated with core functions, to your point, however you articulate that. But then, and again to your point, some of those things are like one-to-one relationship, right? Like we do it, we can see the outcome, we plow the snow off the road, and we can see that it's done. But there's a lot of things too where the county's role is more elusive, or it's still real, even though some of it can be wrapped up in perception. But maybe that wouldn't be sort of falling under what you're speaking to say it's not the higher priority items within a strategic plan, but we still recognize that there's aspects of what we do that might be harder to make those connections, or it might be sort of peripheral things, kind of like economic development, right? Like the argument for counties is often, we don't have TIFs or TIDs, we don't do that outside of joint review board participation, but we do the parks, we do the roads, we do the other things that indirectly feed that conversation, but are often left out of the conversation when people are talking about it. And so I'm just trying to see if I can flesh out a way to help point what you're saying in a direction that would, allow the plan to get parsed out a little more differently, maybe in terms of what you're speaking to there, in terms of more clear relationship priority, and then less clear but still there, maybe not the highest priority, in terms of how we talk about prioritization of any of these strategies.
Yeah, if I can add one thing, I like the word elusive. The county government is in my experience, it's hard to put your finger on what our role is, and that's why I think these discussions, I appreciate them. To your point about what our core function is, I also think the core expectation of county government also ebbs and flows in ways that perhaps we wouldn't anticipate. In 2009, the county board made a very clear judgment. Our role is not broadband. And that has changed. That, hey, we're not the ones delivering the service, but we do have some levers we can pull to address the community need. So I think I don't know that I'm going to be helpful in where you want to go forward, but I think it's a good conversation. I mean, the big thing now that some of the big things that are being talked about. I recently attended the National Association of Counties Conference, and we just had a Wisconsin Counties Association conference not all that long ago. I mean, workforce development is a big discussion point for counties. Housing is something that historically counties don't do a lot of. I think you brought it up in another meeting, Supervisor Baker, about housing authorities for counties. There is a statute within 59, Chapter 59, that talks about the ability of counties to have a stronger role in housing. We don't. We participate in a consortium through the Community Development Block Grant that's operated at the federal level. Our lead county for our consortium is Juneau County. But counties are looking at the workforce shortage and the fact that we don't have as many people. Our workforce replacement rate has fundamentally changed from where it was before. So how do we bring people to our communities to do the jobs that we need to address? I mean, that's good news, bad news here. We're not unique. Everyone's struggling with this. That's, I guess, good and bad. But people are seeing a county government role in places similar to broadband. It wasn't the county role in 2009. Fast forward to 2019, and the county had a very different answer to that. It's not our core responsibility, just like our core responsibility. There's no mandate for you to have a parks department and have wonderful parks. There's no mandate for you to have a solid waste department. But you have identified those things as, hey, the county can play a role, and we directly provide those things. And there are rules, make no mistake. If you do have a solid waste department, then a whole series of statutes kick in. And I think Supervisor Baker, you're on the solid waste board, so you understand. If you make the decision, yes, a whole lot of things follow. But to Chris's point, I mean, it's a difficult conversation to have. What is the county's role? And we have some things where it's very clear. We do have obligations relative to child protection. We have obligations relative to mental health. We have obligations relative to law enforcement. We have obligations relative to roadways. But your level of service you need to provide is not always so clear. I mean, you do have a requirement for infrastructure, for highways. It doesn't say they need to be 40 or 50 feet wide and paved. They can be gravel. If anyone drives out west, you'll see that there's a lot of counties where the county roads are gravel. I'm not advocating for that. I'm just stating a point. I don't want to get a bunch of phone calls to my office tomorrow, or else I'll give Kim's phone number so they call her. But the question of what is the priority, what does the county need to focus on, it is exactly what, quite honestly, I hope you have a discussion about, because some of these are unclear. Like, I have not spent a great deal of time on Objective 10.6 over the last 2 years.
Okay, thank you. So moving on to, so strategy A and B, are we changing some wording in there, Craig, or not?
That's up to this committee. There are, like I said, I apologize. I thought everybody had the updates from the 4th of July, but this is what I went off of to indicate there were action items taken. Like on B, there were 5 action items taken. Does that change, what B should read? Infrastructure, it did. We changed, in fact, the one outcome measure that said by 2022, 9,800 more people would have internet. We scratched that and put total of 85%, at least 85% of the people in Marathon County would have high-speed internet. So, like I said, that's what I want or would like this committee to do. What I want to do, but I'm just saying, if you don't have any changes, that's fine. I'm not advocating to make changes. I just want it to be this committee's strategic plan for these 4 objectives. And Supervisor Baker, I'm sorry, he said to get new ones or change them. That's fine too. If you have better ideas, maybe they're not even in the comp plan. What are they? You know, what do you want in this strategy? What do you want in this objective? I want to hear that, and executive does too. So if you want to wipe this whole thing out and say we're going to start over, that's up to this committee. I'm not doing it, like I said, but I want it to come from this committee. So,
Okay.
and Supervisor Baker had a question.
Supervisor Baker?
So in strategy B, who in county government is responsible for that? Who would be doing that?
So on each page of the strategic plan, we have, as part of the strategic plan, the county board identified departments in their mind that would contribute to accomplishing that. So you'll see that list in the bottom right. So certainly I have meetings with representatives from the local UW. I also speak relatively frequently. I had previously with the former president of NTC, but I speak now relatively frequently with Jeannie Warden. We do have, I think, a pretty strong relationship relative to my peers with those two entities, but Conservation Planning and Zoning Corporation Council, Administration, Emergency Management, the library, McDevco, and Parks, Recreation, and Forestry were identified. But again, in terms of what actively are we doing each day, based on based on the language of the strategy, excuse me, really it's reaching out, hey, are there ways for us to partner? I'll give you one example that is probably very insignificant. The county board, a couple of years ago, approved a capital project at the UW campus for significant renovations to their field house and the pool. And in doing that, one of the things that county administration and the Parks Department did was we sat down and we held some meetings with them to see what opportunities might exist for the county to program some time within those facilities for public use, because actually in Marathon County, our Parks Department, and again, it serves jointly the county and also the city, it really does not have a very robust programming aspect that you might see in other municipalities, particularly cities and villages, but also in counties where recreation programs are delivered directly by a governmental entity. We are very fortunate in Marathon County that we have a lot of clubs that do a lot of that recreation planning, but in keeping with this strategy, we wanted to understand what the potential opportunity would be for that. So that's one of the conversations we had with them. Like I said, it's a pretty insignificant example, but it's that sort of idea.
Just to kind of flesh that out and a little bit, this is an area of interest to me too, because even what Lance was referencing there in terms of our relationship with UW, that is allowed by statute in Chapter 59, and it carves it out specifically that we can have that relationship with two-year campuses of the UW system. But statute is silent on the tech schools. And so maybe if there was interest to say, well, how can counties have a relationship statutorily with tech schools, that could be some sort of strategy where we could say, well, we would make an appeal to the legislature to amend Chapter 59.56 to say, look, UW system's great, but these tech schools are doing good things too, and why can't we expand that same area statute to include tech schools? So just as for example, in terms of what you're talking about.
If I may, Mr. Chair, I don't know if it was around 2010, maybe earlier, the county gave North Central Technical College, I believe it was $1 million to start their agricultural program. And it's still operating, and I don't know, maybe, Mr. Chair, you know more about it as far as what the tech's doing, but they're still using it. It's a farm. Yeah, I think they deal with not only just the tech, the milking cows and farming, but they also with new technology on how to do things, and they're still doing it. They had an open house for the board, and we were out there, but I haven't been out there since. I'm not a real big farmer, but.
And one other example on the tech school side, like Chris referenced, the Regional Forensic Science Center Task Force, the Morgue Task Force. I've been speaking with Jeannie Warden, the president of NTC, quite extensively about that, which, knock on wood, everybody, if that comes to pass and we do get funding from the state of Wisconsin to kind of move that forward, the current desire is to have the Regional Forensic Science Center co-located on the NTC campus. The NTC has already offered up an in-kind donation of the land, co-locate it and connect it to their existing emergency, their first responder training facility they're intending on remodeling. And we're also having conversations with the state of Wisconsin about their desire to partnership. So we have those conversations kind of as opportunities come up. We like to think of the technical college and the university as potential partners, and it's easier with the university, like Chris said. All of you as the county board, I mean, look back, I forget how long ago the lease is signed with the Board of Regents. It's like in the 1950s or 60s that our most recent agreement was signed. Those are county buildings. You paid to build them. You pay every year, and you will see in your capital improvement budget this year more projects coming from the university to operate that campus. That is a very close relationship. Could we improve it? We've had conversations with them about, hey, could we have some of our required ongoing education and training for our staff? Can we partner there? Because every dollar that gets spent at the campus is a good thing locally, as opposed to having it leave the county. That's how I view it. And as long as we can continue to keep that campus vibrant, it's a good thing, because then we don't have to figure out what to do with all those buildings that are continuing to being used.
Supervisor Baker?
So I actually meant to lead with this, so I want to make sure I say it. I am 100% in support of the campuses here at North Central Tech in the library. I'm not suggesting, that they're not highly valuable, and in fact, I made a proposal recently for Strategy B, that we might help the UW with some lab equipment out of ARPA, which didn't turn out to be appropriate. But I'm saying, I don't want my comments to be taken as lack of support for the programs, just trying to define the relationship between the county and the programs. So.
And if you have any good ideas on how we could do that more directly or efficiently, I mean, that's what this conversation is about. And I'll get into this when I do my real short budget presentation, but direction is greatly appreciated. If you want us, when we know what the goal is, I think we feel a lot better. That's not to say that we will reach it, but we will do our best to do it. Right now, it's not really clear to staff on what the board is looking for with strategy 10.6. So to your point, it's unclear what our role is. We share in that assessment. So to the extent you, as the lead committee for this objective, can further provide clarity, I know I and the rest of our staff would appreciate it.
Okay, thank you. So what does the committee think about 10.6? Do we keep it the way it is, or do we change some wordings? Or, looking for some directions from the committee members. So no objections to leaving it the way it is, or do we want to change some wording?
Could I just ask a question from Supervisor Book, because I know I talked to her prior to this. Supervisor Book, I don't know if you have any ideas, changes, or suggestions for 10.6, the strategies, or the 2 outcome measures.
I'd like to see it left the way it is. At this point, we have nothing that we'd like to no ideas as how to improve it. Perhaps it needs to be improved. But in order to continue with the process, I think we need to make a decision. So I think leaving it as it is for now, I think we'll have another opportunity in a couple of years. We can go ahead with it.
Administrator Leonard.
Interestingly, Chris and I have had a conversation, we had it again today, but maybe this would be, just to make a suggestion to you. I've referenced the Wisconsin Counties Association and the National Counties Association, some of the discussions they've had recently. And I just today referenced that I serve on the Greater Wausau Chamber of Commerce board by virtue of the direction from the county to do so. Perhaps it would be helpful if we bring Dale Knapp from Forward Analytics through the Counties Association, because he's done a lot of work on our workforce participation rate, excuse me, not the workforce participation rate, the replacement rate, kind of the demographic shifts that are happening in the state of Wisconsin. He was just at the Towns Association meeting, the Joint Towns Association meeting, and talked about that and how trying to convey the situation we're in. I could reach out to Dale, and I kind of already did at that Towns Association meeting, to see if he'd be willing to come to talk to the board, to have Dale Knapp and Dave Ekman come and talk about kind of what the state of the state is for Wisconsin in terms of demographic shift and the needs of the business community, to see maybe if that helps this committee define what the role of the county could be in supporting or addressing those issues. If that's something that you'd like me to do, I'd be happy to do that.
Is anybody from the committee wishing, do we want this to happen?
Yeah,
Supervisor Rosenberg?
I'd be interested in hearing that, although I've been hearing about our demographic situation for 30 years. There was people involved in that have been banging the drums that we're getting older and older. And 30 years ago, they were talking about it, and all the women moving to Minneapolis, and we're not having kids. And I mean, that's exactly the way he said it. I mean, I didn't make that up. He asked the audience, he said, and this is 25, 30 years ago, how many of you had daughters that are between the ages of 20 and 26? You know, and there's a lot of them raise their hands. And how do they like Minneapolis? And how many live in Minneapolis? And it was a surprising number of people that kept their hands up for that. We're losing people, and we have been for a long time.
Any more comments from the committee? Greg?
If I may, I was at the Towns Association. The acoustics was terrible, so I missed half of what he was saying. I heard it, but I couldn't understand it. But I did catch about the baby boomers being the largest group of people that are leaving the workforce. It's never happened before, the amount of people, the baby boomers, and the people that are coming up now, the parents had 1 or 2 kids. There's no 5 kids or 10 kids. We're not, just because of the population, it's decreasing. We're not going to be able to fill all these jobs that the baby boomers are leaving. Isn't that, he had said something about that. Like I said, it was hard to hear, but it was very interesting. And like I said, I would be interested in listening to it when I could actually hear it.
Okay, thank you. So I think, do we invite them to come to just a committee meeting, to the EED, or do we want the presentation through the full board?
I would say that if you're interested, the whole board would benefit from hearing it, because it ties into not only what we're talking about here, but even near term and even conceptually longer term kind of decision making around what's the county going to do. Because to Greg's point too, you've got the baby boomer as a population, and we're talking about them leaving the workforce, but at the same time they're leaving the workforce, they're generating a big population of people that we need to serve. So then how do you adjust to that? And then get the people you need to do all of that at the same time that as that population need dwindles, then you're going to have to adjust again. You know, it's a really interesting sort of dilemma in terms of the questions it poses for any local government, really. But getting our heads wrapped around that is really important because, especially these days with inflation, people tend to look at just wages and other factors, which certainly play a role, but often enough, people don't talk about the fact that the people don't exist. And so then it gets back to, well, who do you try to attract? And then this gets back to the housing, because if you need to attract a young family because you want them to stay here and view them coming here sort of in a systemic way, like if you get a family to come here, their kids go to our schools, they're shopping at the stores, they're going to the businesses, and they need the house that fits their family and fits the amount of money that they're making in the job they're working in here that they can establish, then that, until the tax base changes, affects counties, because you lose those people, you lose your tax base as far as the county goes. I mean, well, local governments in general. So it's a really big discussion, but I think it's a really important part of it that the board, it would speak to all of the committee's purviews, really, in some form or fashion.
Okay, can we get that done?
We'll work on it. We'll find a time, and Chair Gibbs is on the Wisconsin Counties Association board, so he's on the exec board, so he can put the screws to Dale Knapp.
Okay, thank you. Now, getting back to 10.6, are we clear on leaving it the way it is? Or do we want,
That's totally fine as far as if this committee's comfortable with it.
okay, if
Like I
this
said-
committee's comfortable with it, then we'll leave it the way it is, and we'll move on to the next one. I'd like to put the three together as a motion when we get done, if that's possible.
And, thank you, Mr. Chair. And yesterday at Health and Human Services, they didn't make any, they talked about their three objectives, I believe, and they had some good discussion. They didn't make any outright determinations. The chair and the vice chair of that committee are going to meet, and then they'll come back to their next meeting, discuss it, and then move their recommendations forward. So certainly don't have to do it today. I'm just, like I said, but we have, if 10.6 is staying the way it is, we did 8.7. You have two more. You got 10.8 and what the other one was, but that's up to you. Like I said, I'm not telling you have to make those. I'm not asking you to make those decisions today, but if that's up to you, I mean, I'm willing to go through them, but it's up to the committee.
Well, on 10.6, if we're not doing, I mean, if we're not making any changes to it, then I think we should just leave it the way it is, and do we want to take each one as individual, make a motion, or do we want to, or do we need to make a motion? Or do we just want to review these yet, and then,
You did make you did take action on 8.7.
yep,
So
okay, we can take action on 10.6, so do we need a motion?
Did we want to wait until we hear from the speaker from WCA on 10.6? I thought that was part of the,
Okay, yeah, why don't we, okay, thank you for reminding me that. That was just 2 minutes ago, so. Oh, yeah, okay, thank you. Moving on to objective 10.8. Vice Chair McEwen.
yeah, this basically, you have two strategies and two outcome measures. And in the updates from Administrator Leonard, starting with the strategies, the first one's Strategy A, support efforts to engage the public and private sectors to provide leadership for county economic development efforts. And in the updates from Administrator Leonard, under Strategy A, there were two action items taken. And the second, there's some bullet points on there, and the second bullet point deals with the 2050 transportation plan that has been presented to the infrastructure committee, and we're currently, looking at that to review it. It's like about 150 pages, so it'll take us a while. But that plan has been completed. Like I said, infrastructure has been presented with it, but we haven't taken any formal action on it. And then the second, I gotta get to the right page here. Too far. Can't find 10. Oh, okay. So yeah, on the strategy A, there was one action that was taken, and the second bullet point on there refers to Marathon County's 2050 transportation plans. That has been presented from North Central Wisconsin Regional Planning Commission to infrastructure, but we haven't taken any formal action on it. And then the second action that was taken on strategy A was new executive director seeking to various groups about McDevco programs and lending for county economic development. And so that's what's been done on strategy A, those two updates. So I don't know if there's is there any questions as far as what does that mean? What's the same thing with objective 10.10, or 10.8, encourage development and redevelopment of key employment centers like the mall in the areas that possess strong market potential, provide a good transportation access for workers, and promote the efficient movement of goods. That's why infrastructure is a support committee on that has to do with highways and but is there any questions about what that means?
Anybody have any questions for?
For the objective, starting with, is there? I mean, is it clear as mud, or is it you're not sure what what direction? And like I said, in chapter 10, there are a lot of objectives and strategies, and this is 10.8 that was taken out of there. So, like I said, strategy A, 2 action items were taken. Is there any changes to that wording or not? Same thing with get to the objective 10.8. Is there anything you want to change on what that's stating? Looking at Supervisor Baker. Go ahead.
A couple months ago, I had talked about our objectives, and one of the ones that I recall was outcome measure 1. I think we need to change that because I don't think we actually want to increase the utilization, because we would want to actually have the industrial parks growing. So I think the utilization maybe should actually stay constant. I haven't written what I think it should be, but I just think that's not an accurate goal or a good goal, because we should have them growing and both in capacity and in utilization, so that the percentage of used, if it goes up 5% every year, pretty soon they're full and we have no place for people to move into. So I think we need to address that, but I don't know I guess I can, if you want me to take that on, I could try to rewrite it for next meeting, if that's appropriate.
Be up to your chair.
We can get that rewriting done?
If Lance wants to volunteer to do that, that would be great too.
I think this I think he's got enough on his plate right now. But yeah, that you're on this committee and you want to.
I'd be willing to look at that and see if we can come up with a better outcome.
Okay, so then for the next meeting, you'll have something written up for us that you think we need?
Do my best to have that done.
Okay, thank you.
Can I make a suggestion? And it's actually, your comments brought something top of mind, and that is, it aligns with the discussions that HR Finance and Property is having. It's not going to be too far in the future when we will have property that I think meets the definition of one of these areas, a key employment center with strong market potential, where we will own property that is vacant from county operations, and I'm speaking about the River Drive properties. You know, the city of Wausau has done a lot kind of to the north, but now we're going to have the South River Drive properties. We're also going to have the social services building that in the very near future is going to be vacant because we're relocating those staff to trying to consolidate our footprint. So perhaps an additional strategy, or it may be an outcome measure, depending on how this committee or the board wants to take it, is, you know, literally coming up with a county policy relative to the divestment of county-owned properties that are no longer needed. You know, that divestment could be the outright sale, or it could be, maybe divestment is the wrong word because I'm speaking off the top of my head, but you know, how do we develop the strategy for properties that are no longer necessary for direct county operations? Do we want to look at opportunities for long-term land leases that support the economic development strategy of the county? Just thinking out loud, you know, those are things we're going to need sooner rather than later. Staff are certainly able to execute on strategy, and we can develop strategy, but what should guide it? What are the policy decisions that this board needs to make that will guide staff on determining what those things are? Okay. That's top of mind for me because I just had that conversation this morning. But you know, how do we start looking at what we're going to do with those pieces of property?
Okay, thank you. So then moving on here, the two changes for strategy A that was recommended, I think the committee would go along with it, you know, that you had before, Craig, that you mentioned.
I was just reading the updates from Administrator Lemons.
Okay, thank you.
Update, and I, like I said, I apologize. I thought everybody had those. Most of them, but like I said, I actually printed it out because I'm trying to just develop some thoughts about if there anything needs to be changed or update, and what's been done, you know, what's been accomplished or implemented. So, but you know, as far as you know, what Supervisor Baker wants to do, I think that's a great idea to try to clean this up a little bit, the outcome measures, the first one.
Okay.
But that's up, like, again, up to this committee.
Okay, any more on objective 10.8? And we'll move on.
Yeah, and like I said, that's fine. I'm not. You haven't really changed anything, which is fine because of we're still trying to work on it. And that's great. Like I said, I'm not saying I want to get it done. The infrastructure, it was a little bit easier to do it, like I said, because 8.7, I got Supervisor Robinson on there. He's the chair of the broadband task force. We went through that, you know, very quickly. So we just had one, and we were able to get that done. Now, like I said, Health and Human Services is going to bring the information back to the whole committee next month after the chair and the vice chair meet about that. So that's something, you know, how this committee wants to handle it. That's, you know, it's up to the committee. So you can leave it the way it is at this point until you get some, you know, necessary verbiage in these outcome measures or the strategies. That's I'd rather do it that way and get it right.
Okay. So we will leave the strategies and the objectives the way they are now, and maybe some follow-up with the outcome measures later. Excuse me. Okay, moving on to the last one. I think it's what, 10.10? Objective 10.10? that this committee is involved with? Any suggestions from the committee about any changes or anything to it? Vice Chair McEwen?
Yeah, thank you. As far as the strategies for 10.10, there's 3 of them. And strategy A, there were 2 actionable items that were taken as far as the update from Administrator Leonard. Strategy B, there were 2 actionable items taken. And strategy C, there's a page and a half of action, so there must have been a lot of them, a lot of changes. You know, so and like I said, it's kind of difficult if the committee hasn't looked at those updates that were given to them, and like I said, it would make it a lot easier. You know, that you might be able to complete some of them. Like I said, we completed 2 of them because of what has been done and what's been accomplished. You know, and there's some of these on here that might be accomplished, might be rewarded. So, you know, if at this point, I don't, you know, I mean, I can go through the updates that the administrator had, but I want that to come from, you know, the committee.
Correct.
Same thing with the 2 outcome measures, Mr. Chair. There was 1 actionable item, and the second outcome measure, there was one item that was, you know, accomplished, and I got leave it or change it on here, so that could be up to the committee too. So, but yeah, like I said, at this point, it's you know, I would prefer the committee to look at those updates from the administrator, look at the strategies, look at the outcome measures, and see if there's anything that could be completed, could be reworded. You know, like I said, to make it more current. But that's up to the committee. It's, but I don't want to make suggestions that I think should be, you know, that this committee should be changing.
Okay, thank you. Supervisor Rosenberg?
I no longer have that July 4th memo. Can that be sent out again?
Probably better send it to me too. Thank you. Okay, so everybody take a look at the changes for 10 point objective 10.10, and we will come back next month and hopefully we can have a better view of it. So, Greg?
Yeah, thank you. And like I said, it's difficult if you know, like I said, if you're not aware of, and see, we have new supervisors on here. They weren't aware of the strategic plan till now, and so there's, you know, we have to give them an opportunity to get familiar with it, and then with the updates. And there was Administrator Leonard reminded me, in 2020 there was an update, and that's online too. I don't know if you could send that to them. It looks just like this, but it goes through all the current, and this was 2020. This one that he sent out on the 4th of July was for 2022, but it wouldn't hurt to look at that 2021 because it even tells you the progress on every one of the strategies, the objective, you know, the outcome measures, and it's very helpful too. I actually forgot about that and just went, but it's online, and I don't know if the administrator can send that out or not. Okay, all right. That's all I have. I've done enough talking and haven't accomplished much, but sorry.
Thank you, Vice Chair McEwen. Moving on to number 6, operational functions required by statute, ordinance, resolutions, or policy. None. Number 7, educational presentation and committee discussion. 7A, update from the administrator on budget preparation process. Lance?
All right, I will go rather quickly through this. There was a meeting, kind of the impetus to this, there was a HR Finance and Property meeting where a new supervisor asked a question about the budget process and kind of trying to understand what the standing committee role was, and it led to a good conversation that I thought, well, this is a good conversation. We should have this with all the committees. So that's what I've been doing the last couple of days. So I've met with, we had the conversation at HR Finance and Property, had it yesterday at Health and Human Services, had it this morning at Infrastructure, and now with all of you. So just to start from, I guess, the beginning, which actually is the beginning of this term, county orientation meeting with Wisconsin Counties Association, talking about the role of the board as policymakers and that you're tasked with setting those policies within the limits of state law and administrative code. So I wasn't the one to say it, but I have said it time and time again. We have these areas, to Supervisor Baker's point about, the areas of our core duties, and we have services we have to provide, and then we have a lot of other areas where once we start providing services, we have to deliver them to a certain level, and then we have areas where there are discretionary services. The board sets a lot of those policies in the discretionary area. In the mandated areas, we do it related to administrative code and state statute. Those drive a lot of the work we do. So whenever you hear about state agencies that we work with, the Department of Corrections, they drive a lot of the stuff that we do in the jail. The Department of Children and Families, we deliver a lot of services to the level that the Department of Children and Families says that our social services department has to. North Central Healthcare, we are an owner of North Central Healthcare. The Department of Health Services dictates what our state mandates are and how we have to deliver those services. So there's a lot of those areas. And then the Solid Waste Board, once the board had made the determination to have a solid waste department and have a landfill, we have all these regulations and things we need to meet. And then we have the discretionary side where you make determination of, one, whether or not to do it, and two, at what level you want to do it. And similarly, in some of the mandated areas, we might deliver a service. Roads are a good example. We do have obligations relative to, and mandates relative to roads. But it's not a mandate that every road has to be, as I referenced before, that every road needs to be paved or so many feet wide or have a bike lane or edge line rumble strips. So that's a service level determination that the board gets to make. So that's the role of the board. So let me tell you a little bit about the role of staff and how that relates to the budget building process. And this has been, as I understand it, the way that budgets have been built in the past in this county and other counties as well. Staff's role is really to take the programs and services that the board says we want to provide these, or we're mandated to provide these, and we're to look for the most efficient and effective way to do it. We are the how people, you are the what people. So let me give you an example of how to do that, because every year in the budget, you've heard Chair Gibbs reference this, and I think this was also in orientation. Every year in the budget, we start out with essentially what people affectionately refer to as a structural deficit. Our fiscal constraints are such that we take in terms of new money through net new construction, a dollar amount that is very often, as far back as I can recall, it is less than what the increase in costs are to deliver the same services we delivered the year before. I think everybody acutely realizes this now in their personal life, right? The cost of us to do the same things we did last year, purchase the same things, drive the same distances, go shopping for food, costs us significantly more than it did last year. County government is very similar in that fact. So staff are looking for ways to, absent direction from the board or from a standing committee, to stop delivering a service or reduce a service level of an existing program. Then on the flip side, expand an existing program or create a new program. We're always looking for the way to deliver the services within those fiscal constraints. So how do we do that? One is continuous process improvement. That is efficiency. So we are constantly looking for ways to deliver services more efficiently and less costly. I gave the example this morning at infrastructure with roadways. A number of years ago, we did a process improvement project, and for those of you that have had the pleasure, you go through a lot of sticky notes, but you map out the process of current state on a wall, and then you start identifying the areas of waste to try to get that process to be more efficient and less costly. We did that with something as just inherently interesting as crack filling, the work we do on the highway, and we identified a lot of opportunities that significantly, our new process significantly expanded our efficiency and reduced costs. Similarly, something as interesting as how we handle child protection cases. We identified a lot of cost savings and time savings in doing that. So that's one way, through continuous process improvement. The second is technology. Again, this morning with infrastructure, I gave an example of brining. You've heard us talk about brining before, using that as an alternative to road salt. Getting more of that salt, that de-icing salt, onto the roadway. Looking at asphalt mixes. Staff are looking out, trying to determine, is there a better mix of asphalt and aggregate that is more cost effective? We don't expect the board to do that. That's a staff job. And then lastly, the third of the kind of three-legged stool that, again, is a staff job, model changes. So you give the direction of what programs to deliver, and for the last 20 years or more, the county board has asked for a nurse home visiting prenatal and postnatal program. So for at-risk families, we've had a program where a nurse would engage with that family before the child is born, continue that engagement after the child is born to try to improve birth outcomes and improve really adult outcomes for that family, that child. The model we've used to do that is Start Right. So when I talk about model changes, we evaluate whether or not there's a better model. And recently the health department, at the direction of the board had wanted really a good understanding, a better understanding of return on investment, the idea that if we put in $10 to this program, what is the return on investment for it? Because it's not a mandated program. The county board has for decades said we want to do it. We think there's value. But recently there was, well, how can we really demonstrate value locally? So we identified, we partnered with the University Year program to try to do an evaluation, help us understand what the return on investment is, look at the data that we have. And the analysis came back and said, hey, there's value to this program, but your ability to really utilize your data to show that and articulate that in a very clear way, it's difficult because the Start Right model that we used is essentially, by the end, it's a homegrown thing. There wasn't another model quite like it. So what I asked staff to do is to go out and look to see if there's a better model that would deliver on what the board was looking for based on its discussions that it has had at the last several budgets. And the health officer did that with her team and identified a different model. The model is called the Nurse Family Partnership Model. It's used in more than 40 states, including Wisconsin, where multiple counties have used it. There's very good data on the return on investment for that program. So we're making, or for that model, excuse me. So we're making that model change. Again, that's a staff job. It's the board's job to say whether or not we want a nurse home visiting program. It's the staff's job to find the best nurse home visiting program or model we can. Similarly to the asphalt piece, right? The board determines how many roadways we want to maintain. We don't expect you to tell us the asphalt to aggregate mix. That's our work. So how I'm going to build the budget is absent direction from each standing committee on expanding an existing program, creating a new program, or terminating an existing program, or dropping the level of service. I'm going to work with staff to build a balanced budget, which is required by law. Your budget will be balanced, but the idea will be, absent direction, specific direction, to deliver all of the same programs and services that you have historically funded through the budget. So if, I'm asking each standing committee, if you do have that direction, please provide it. We will continue to bring to you these model changes that we've been pursuing, because I've been asking department heads in anticipation of what I kind of saw on the horizon to be a tough fiscal situation with all things inflation and market uncertainty and the costs of wages, that our budget is going to be tighter. So I've been asking for that start right model evaluation. I've been asking for, and we're almost complete with a shelter home model evaluation. So this is an example that you'll see in the future. You know, one of the simplest model ideas, and this helps me understand it, is whether or not we go out to contract for something or we deliver it ourselves. That's a model change. That's a decision staff, you, by virtue of having an administrator, organized county, that is in statute to be my job. We figure out how to do it. So if it's more cost effective, and we do this in a highway department, for example, we chip seal roadways. It's a maintenance project, but we don't do it directly. We contract that out. Every once in a while, we go out and see, could we do it ourselves? Or is it still more cost effective to contract it out? But that's a model delivery decision that we make as staff. You make the decision of, you know, how much money do you want to put toward roadway maintenance? So that was a long-winded way of saying, if you have things you want us to do, new programs, if you want us to, when you go through this strategic planning effort and identify, Supervisor Baker can work with Deputy Administrator Holman to clarify what those strategies are and outcomes. And if you want a county economic development staff person to be able to do A, B, and C, we can talk about how we do that. If you have a new program you want to fund a program through McDevco to accomplish a goal, that's the direction I need to build the budget. Otherwise, you're going to get a budget that delivers all the same services that you've historically asked for.
Okay, thank you. Any questions for Administrator Leonard?
Is this significantly different than what you've done in the past?
No, but I thought it was a good conversation at HR Finance, because it is what we've all, as I understand it, what we've always done, but recognizing there are 17 people have never gone through it before, it was a really good conversation. A new supervisor kind of asked that question that led to this conversation. So I thought, well, that was probably very valuable to explain to all of the other committees as well. But make no mistake, it's the same stuff we've always done.
Okay, thank you. Any more questions from the committee? Okay, moving on to 7B, report from the UW Extension. Jason?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. There we go. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, so I will also keep this brief unless there are questions from the body. So you have our written report in the packet, and I appreciate the opportunity to always share that out with the committee. A couple of things that I know Chair Seefeld is taking a leave of absence from the county fair today to be with you all. And so our staff is out at the fair working hard to, if you are out there in the youth exhibit building, they have hands-on activities every day of the fair. Our 4-H educators, there's a grilled cheese competition focusing on dairy. So Heather Susser, our ag educator, is focusing on dairy and the different productions there. Janelle is doing some horticulture outreach at our booth. So the county has a booth, and we're supporting that too. But we also have an extension booth in the area as well. So that's kind of the piece for this month. But you see in the write-up, there are a couple things I want to highlight on youth development. Our 4-H staff took a couple of trips with our young people, educational experiences, funded in part by the 4-H Leaders Association and user fees. That is to Washington, D.C., and also to Discover Wisconsin. So they traveled the state, and it's an opportunity for our young people to get outside of Marathon County to see what our great state has and experience those life skills of organization and empathy towards others and kind of getting outside of their home that maybe this is the first time they've traveled for some of our young people. So it's great. We also partner with Stevens Point, UW Stevens Point for College for Kids. So you saw that in your packet. It's a continued partnership. We haven't had that partnership for a couple of years, and so it's great to bring that back. So that's under the youth development area in 4-H. The green team with horticulture, that's a partnership with veterans. So if you're looking in the horticulture area with Janelle, to work with our veterans in a horticulture therapy arena. So that's active and going. The FoodWise program, you might remember that, or might notice that Tammy Hansen's name is off that list. It was just gone new. Tammy retired last month, and we've actually extended an offer to a new administrator who will start at the end of September. I don't have a signed agreement in my hand, so I don't want to jinx that and say who that is, and then it gets pulled out from under me, but I'd be happy to report on that next month. I'm really excited about who we're having. That person will serve the entire 4-county area, but does reside here in Marathon County. So we are super excited that person will be at our office here, serving the 4 counties, but based here in Marathon County. Again, FoodWise is a 100% state-funded, i.e. federally funded program with minimal investment to the county, and that FoodWise agreement was at your desk last month. The last thing I want to just make the body aware of, and thanks to administration for the support of leverage funding, looking at opportunities to increase our outreach, our impact to the community through minimal investment, using some savings within our budget. We're moving forward with hiring we have a partnership with AmeriCorps, and we know that's always a great investment. We get almost a full-time staff member for minimal investment. We're talking, $7,000-8,000 for a full year, full-time employee, and expanding our outreach. So we have that partnership that's happening using some current budget allocations and leveraging that. So we'll be recruiting that. That'll help in our 4-H program to do some in-school and after-school programming to outlying areas of the county, not focused here in the Wausau area, because we do have a partnership with Wausau already for the Community Connections program in the summer, but trying to get some outlying school districts and extra support to them through our program is what we're looking to do. So with that, that's the updates I have for today, unless there's questions from the body.
Any questions for Jason? Okay, thank you, Jason.
Thank you.
Moving on to 7B, report from, or 7C, report from the UW Stevens Point. Mrs. Toms has a report in your packet. You can review it. And moving on to 7D, monthly summary of the Marathon County Public Library. Leah's here?
Yes, I'm here. Hi. Also, in the interest of brevity, I won't go into detail on the summary that you have in your packet unless there is any questions about it. There is one thing that I'd like to bring to the attention of this committee, and we have a lot of new committee members here who might not know the whole story, but about a year and a half ago, the library board voted, they took action to leave our system. And a system is like a way of connecting member libraries so that they can share materials and share our ILS, the software that we use for keeping book records and those kinds of things. And when that happened, that action is something that would need to go to county board, and it would come to this committee first. But then various things happened in the past year and a half, and that was put on hold. And so what the library board decided to do was to gather additional information before following through with that action. So what they asked was our current system, WVLS, to do, well, we created a document of expectations, things that we wanted to see from our system that the library board felt that maybe we weren't getting. So I worked with the library board to create that document, and then on a quarterly basis, WVLS will report to the library board, and then in December, they will revisit the action and make the decision. So I just want you all to know that. Last month at the last board meeting, WVLS was there to give their quarterly summary of where they are at in this expectations document. And so in December, in the event of the library board deciding to follow through with the action to leave the system, that decision would go to this committee, I think, for open comment and discussion, and then go to the county board for a final decision. So I don't know where we're at with that. We're still determining and still looking at how this is going to progress over the year, but it's just something that I wanted you all to be aware of. And if anybody has any questions about that or anything else, I'm happy to answer.
Any questions from the committee? Supervisor Rosenberg?
What's happening at the state level? Isn't there it's divided into 7 districts now? I forget.
You mean the systems?
Yeah, the systems, there was talk of abolishing them and doing something different altogether.
Yes. So I'm trying to think. PLSR, I think, is the group that was looking into that. We currently have 16 systems in the state, which is a lot. And I think the vision would be to consolidate those, to have fewer systems. So there's more consistency. So there's more ability to share materials and share, resources within a smaller, like a larger area, but fewer systems. And I think that they did come to some recommendation, but there is no state guideline. I think it's, the hope is that over time, these will consolidate and that the systems, they sort of left it up to the systems, I think, to find ways to consolidate and group these systems together so that there are fewer. So there's no rule, there's no law, there's no changing the grouping of the systems, but they did make recommendations. That helps.
Not particularly.
Doesn't help me either.
Can I, Leah, do you want to just talk through, I mean, you alluded to one big benefit of the systems, and that is your library software that is quite expensive, that it's shared amongst the system libraries, but you want to talk through just a little bit about what our role in our system with WVLS is? Are we a big library in our system, a small library in our system, and how does our system compare to the others in the state?
That's a good question. I don't have the map of the systems. You can see geographically, we're similar in size to other systems. There are some exceptions, like Milwaukee County is all by itself. They're not like a greater system. And the idea, if we were to leave WVLS, would be you have to be adjacent to another area. So the only other system I think we could join is South Central, and then there might be one more to the west. So I don't know if I'm answering your question, but
Sure. I think that's good. I mean, the idea is every system has to have a lead. We're the lead in the Wisconsin VLS, right? What is that?
Right. That makes it a little bit more complicated as well. So we're the resource library is the term. We're the largest library in our system. We are 25 member libraries. Among them, we are the largest. And that holds with it certain responsibilities. In fact, WVLS, our system, grants us money so that we can have unique items, things that you can't house in a small library that we can house because we have the space and share among other member libraries. And there are other things too. We're also sort of, in a lot of ways, we lead the service heightening efforts because we're the resource library. We have, quite a few degreed librarians. We have people that are very serious about their profession, and they're working in all kinds of ways. And so we do things that are like educational in nature that WVLS will have us share with our other member libraries in WVLS. So if we were to leave and go to South Central, for example, Madison would be the resource library. We would no longer be a resource library.
And the last thing I'll add, and Corp Counsel just made sure I'm going to say the right thing. Leah referenced that this is one of those areas when you look at the statute, the library board makes a recommendation and it has to go, as Leah referenced, to the county board for approval. This is one of those areas where it actually, libraries are important. They have special statutory rules. Requires a 2/3 vote to leave a library system and join a new one. So this was if you want to go back and read them, if you care to read the minutes of previous meetings, this was a big area of discussion because, as Leah said, we have a service expectation and whether or not that's being met. So kudos to the library board and library staff for clarifying what those expectations are, and then we're going to see how our expectations are being met by WVLS, and then there'll be a recommendation made to the county board. And one of the items you'll have to weigh is kind of what Leah's alluding to. The benefits that might be conferred upon Marathon County, you'll have to look at, okay, what are those benefits? How do they impact the county? Make no mistake, there will be if we were to leave, there would be an impact on all of the other libraries that right now, when they need help, they turn to us. Like they view us as, hey, you're the experts in there. We're the biggest library within that system. So it's a complex issue, again, set forth. This is one of those areas in statute. Once you have a library system, you got to operate in all these various ways.
Thank you. And one other thing about the complex issue of it is I prefer to think of it in terms of population and not funding, but we represent just under 40% of the population and or funding for WVLS. Out of 25 libraries, we're 40% or just under. So that would have a huge impact on the system.
If I remember right, when I looked at the numbers, the city of Wausau has a higher population than each individual counties in our system currently.
It's possible. I'm not positive. I'm trying to think of the next largest library to us. It could be not TB Scott. I don't know, but we're definitely much larger than all of the other libraries.
Well, it sort of bothers me because they'll have to go to a different system instantly because they can't exist on their own. The other thing is the computer programs and stuff, and I'm not convinced that what Madison has is a step up. It's the open source, and it's a mess to try to change anything in it.
Supervisor Baker?
The library system, WVLS, is that right? Or is there a board of directors for that, or who? And then, do we have representation on that?
Yes, we do. We have a Marathon County representative on the WVLS board.
So if we're 40% and we're unhappy with WVLS, are we unhappy with ourselves? I'm not quite sure. You know what I'm saying? Is it seems like, is that not us that we're complaining about, or?
I will give you an example. So previously, we had one vote. This was one of the points of contention and one of the things that we were unhappy. I say we, but I mean the library board, is that we had one vote out of 25, even though we represented 40% of the population. And they just recently, as part of our expectations document, they changed their voting system to a more weighted voting. It's a dual weighted voting system, but it more accurately represents the people that we serve.
So that's kind of being addressed as, yeah, okay, thank you.
Okay, any more questions for Leah? Thank you very much. Moving on to 7E, presentations regarding library material complaint process.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to Madam Clerk for throwing this in the packet because I forgot to ask her to do that earlier. As the first slide says, this is going to be a brief overview. I'm trying to match the brevity of the previous speakers, so I'm a lawyer. I can't promise anything. So first of all, I wanted to touch real briefly on the statutory relationship between the county board, this committee, and the library system. So libraries in Wisconsin are governed under Chapter 43 of the Wisconsin statutes, and under those statutes, library boards are created. So in Marathon County, the Marathon County Library Board is created as the governing body for policy and operation of our public libraries. Under Statute 4358, the Library Board has exclusive control of library funds and property. So any funds that the county board appropriates to the library decides how to spend those funds. And any property that the library owns, the library owns it, the county does not. The library board is also empowered under that statute to make policy determinations regarding the library and its operations. The county board's relationship is primarily through funding, through the annual budget, also through appointment of the library board, board of directors. All of those board members are appointed by the county board. As far as this committee goes, Section 2.041H of our county board rules indicate there's a non-governance relationship between the library board and this committee that basically results in Leah, our wonderful library director, giving you updates about what's happening at the library, and that's kind of the interface that occurs pursuant to our rules. I know there was some questions at a previous meeting about what the procedure would be for complaints about specific library materials, so I wanted to touch on that. The library board has actually adopted some policies related to collection development and material selection. I put the links to those policies on the slides. And there's also a complaint policy and procedure that the library board has developed and approved for citizen complaints about specific materials. I put the links for those on these slides that are going to be in the packet as well. If you refresh your packet, it'll be there, I promise. But just to give you a brief overview of that process, there is a form that residents can complete for reconsideration of any specific library materials. Those complaints are reviewed by a committee appointed by the library director. That committee makes a recommendation to the director, who makes a decision on that request. If the county resident isn't satisfied with the decision of the library director, they can request a review. The review of that goes to a committee that's consisted of 2 library board members, 2 selection coordinators, and 1 staff person from the library. And that recommendation from the review committee goes to the full library board for a vote. So there's a kind of an internal review process that's created. That policy is governed and created by the library board, so they have control over that process. And as I said, I'm brief, and that's all I have.
Any questions for Mike? Lance?
If I can just add one thing, and Mike referenced this, but I think it's important to note, your tie to the library board, again, through statute, or to the library, I should say, is through statute. You confirm all of the appointments to the library board. That is by virtue of forming a county library system, that's the mechanism through the Wisconsin statutes for the board. The board doesn't, as Mike said, once money goes over to the library, it's the library board's prerogative as to how it is spent. Just wanted to highlight that one additional piece.
Okay, thank you. Supervisor Rosenberg?
Who recommends who's on the board? I mean, where do you get your candidates from?
So I bring names forward, and this was a conversation that I can't remember if it was early this term or late last term. We did make some changes to how we tried to solicit interest, and we did that through the website. We started essentially posting vacancies similar to how we post jobs, and in fact, quite honestly, it's more expansive in that we have a whole list on our website of all of the various committees, commissions, and boards that either myself or the county board chair appoint for, and individuals can go on there, click a link, and say, hey, I'm interested in the following 3 committees. Here's a little bit about myself, so that when we do have a vacancy, it's not just me reaching out to people I know. I don't know all that many people. And it also just allows more people to get involved in county government. So that's the process that I implemented when I started in administration, which again moved us away from, when we would have a vacancy, historical practice was we'd start to go out and try to, well, who wants to be on this, and try to fill it. This way, at least we have kind of a list of names of individuals who might be interested. And then my process, and this is probably what your question was getting at, how do I pick from those interested candidates who to recommend for consideration to the board? I put in that interest form, tell me why you're interested and what qualifications you have, and I look to the board's rules for each of the committees, commissions, and boards that you confirm my appointments, and I look at the mission and the duties and see if, just kind of like we do with a job, does the person have relevant experience or interest that would make them, in my estimation, a good candidate. Again, the full board has the ability to vote yay or nay on any recommendation that I bring forward. I hope that answers the question.
Okay, Supervisor Baker?
From a legal standpoint, does the Corp Council represent the library, and does the county pay for that and the library board pay for that? How does that work?
It's a great question. Without any other agreements, the Corp Council would not have that role, but historically, the library board has contracted with our office to provide legal services to the library. So by virtue of contract, I do provide legal support to the library.
If I can just add, that's one of the things on the work plan that right now Leah's working on. We're updating all of those contracts relative to legal, HR services, financial system services, and facilities services. And the next question, I'm sure I'm stealing your thunder, that you were going to ask was, well, why do we do that? And there's really a very good reason for the county to have that working relationship with Corporation Counsel's office, because while the library board is independent in many respects, if an individual has an issue with a library facility or actions taken by library employees who are county employees, you should always be thinking liability in the back of your head. If you went to law school like Mike or I did, that's always in the back of your mind. Well, who's going to get sued and who's liable? So it's really good that we work very closely with Leah and her team on issues related to HR, on issues related to legal, and on our facilities to make sure that our facilities are maintained appropriately, that our Leah and her team are getting sound legal advice, that we're complying with all necessary budgetary requirements required by statute, and that we're in line with the getting good legal advice to the library.
Okay, thank you. Any more questions from the committee? Seeing none? Okay. Thank you, Mike. Number 8, next meeting date, time, location, announcements, and agenda items. Any announcements? I do have one. As you know, the fair is going on. Come on out and see all the exhibits that our local FFA and 4-H kids have done out there. You won't believe all the exhibits, the pictures, the crops, everything, how nice it's set up, and it's going to take you 2-3 hours to go just through the exhibits to see everybody. And the animal showing is going on today and tomorrow. And the market animal is on Saturday. So anybody that likes to do a lot of walking, come on out to the fair. So, Lance?
To build on that, we also have, the county has a booth out there.
Yep.
Where we're certainly always looking for the next Marathon County employee. So if you know anyone, have them go to the fair, visit our booth, pick up an elephant ear to get them in the mood to really go on our website and apply for any of our vacant positions.
Okay, anybody else? Okay, 8B, next scheduled meeting, Thursday, September 1st, 2022 at 3 p.m. And I'll take number 9. Supervisor Rosenberg with the motion, Supervisor Baker with the second. All those in favor of adjournment, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Oppose? We are adjourned. Thank you, everyone.
Take an hour and a half in that chair.